Have you ever questioned what is the best training split? How much volume do you actually need to grow? Should you train to complete failure or leave a few reps in the tank? This was a bad idea for a shot. How's that tank looking? Can we get more hypertrophy when we change the tempo of our reps? I even hired a research assistant and shaved my balls for this video to make sure that no stone was unturned. You might have seen him on TikTok before correcting Gary Brecka because Gary says some wild shit. Let's start it off at the macro level, looking at some of the most common training splits to see if we can identify a clear winner. You got the bro split, PPL, upper lower, full body, and then a bunch of other random weird shit. The first thing we need to do to be able to judge the shit out of these is categorize them by frequency, because at the end of the day, all a training split really is a way to manage and organize your workouts. That way you can balance anabolic signaling, recovery, and overall volume. For example, one of the justifications for waiting to train a muscle again is allowing for myofibrillar protein synthesis rates to return to baseline before the next workout. Researchers had subjects train a muscle and then stab them with a giant biopsy needle like this and found that rates stay elevated to roughly 48 hours. The reason we care is that hypertrophy can be dumbed all the way down to when myofibrillar protein synthesis rates are higher than muscle protein breakdown, you're growing. So that's an obvious strike against the bro split or any other split that has you train a body part one time per week because you're waiting roughly 168 hours before you train it again. But before you tell the bro split to go eat a jar of, because the more you dig into it, you find that, why would you make it taste like Flintstone vitamins? You discover that myofibrillar protein synthesis rate and duration are influenced by the set volume of the workout. And bro splits typically contain a shitload of sets, so it's probably not as damning as we first thought. For example, this study compared the fractional synthesis rate of 1 set versus 3 sets over a period of 5 to 29 hours. The winner, 3 sets. Regardless of all that, you might have the same intrusive thought that I did, which is why do we even have to wait for muscle protein synthesis rates to come back to baseline? Why can't we just keep them high the entire time? We might not have to. There's really no research on that. This is from a popular meta-analysis comparing low versus high frequency training, which a lot of people use to make the case that high frequency is in fact better. And I'll give it to them. When you first look at it, you think, holy hell, what have I been doing my whole life? Idiot. In fact, when I first saw this research, I switched to an upper-lower split, which, if it's good, I'll make a whole program on it, but that's beside the point. Let me soften my response by saying that the person that created this did an incredible job. If you ever try to create a forest plot like this, it makes you want to go play in traffic. The issue is, the more you dig into research, you realize that a lot of the single studies are often corrupted by people that go into the study with an inherent bias, and then meta-analysis often are filled with people that have that inherent bias and then just find a shitload of studies that prove them right. Everyone's an asshole and they just want to be right. If we bring back up that meta-analysis, it looks like there's 40 freaking studies here, most of which lean towards higher frequency. In reality, this is actually just 13 studies. 9 of those were on trained, 4 were on untrained, and these are the results of the individual body parts in those studies. If you think that's frustrating, let's just pull out one of the results, Hunter female chest circumference, and see what's going on there. You'll never trust anyone again. Turns out that study was with a college weight training class, both female and male participants, where they trained the same exercises either 3 or 4 times a week. That's not low versus high, that's high versus high. They also did some classic exercises like behind the neck press, behind the neck pull downs, and good old knee curls. I hate this so much. And the largest statistically significant result was with the female chest circumference. The girls who trained the same exercises 3 times a week lost 0.7 inches. The girls that trained the same exercises 4 times a week grew by 3 inches. I'm sure we're probably thinking the same thing. The way they measured these poor women was probably because how else do you get that result? When you strip out all the bullshit and look at studies that are actually comparing low versus high frequency and their volume matched, there is no difference. So this is how I would pick a split if I were you. If you're a little mentally disturbed and you use training as a form of therapy and you only feel good if you beat the shit out of a muscle, then using a bro split or anything that hits a muscle 1 time a week is the way to go. If your volume is getting out of hand and it's over 20 sets per body part, then it makes sense to split that up over several days. So either do a PPL split where you get to hit at least 1.5 times a week, or some sort of upper-lower split. I'm still not sold on ever doing a full body split because you have to manage recovery. Insufficient rest will lead to an increase in muscle damage and inflammation, which will then increase muscle protein breakdown. So it doesn't matter how much you increase your protein synthesis consistently, you're gonna probably be breaking down more than you're building. On average, muscle damage recovery takes anywhere from 4 to 5 days. To be able to regain maximal force output, you're looking at 2 to 5 days. Now, there is a phenomenon known as the repeated bout effect, where muscle's been shown over time to be able to do the same workout and incur less damage. Part of my justification for increasing the frequency and trying an upper-lower split, but in terms of a full body split, you'd still have to limit the workouts to 1 set to failure per body part, and most of the general population is not gonna see shit from that. If I had to give a general recommendation on splits, I would say that hitting a body part 1 time a week is perfectly fine as long as your volume doesn't get too high in a single session. If that's the case, split it up. If you want to do higher frequency, you can go all the way up to 3 times a week, but it looks like the optimal range is right at 2 times a week. And if you want to hit full body, I don't know why you would do that. Seems like a dumb idea. Easy for you to say, you're enhanced. Yes, I've been on TRT since I was a little girl. I did a bunch of shit when I was younger. And then about 30, I just switched over to just testosterone and a shitload of peptides because I have a fear of death. Testosterone does make life easier. There's a study where they just gave men straight up testosterone and they didn't do shit with them and they grew. Nice. But I still wouldn't choose a less effective split. If you're natural, I would just err on the side of recovery and not be so rigid with your split. If you need a day off, take it. If you're gonna try higher frequency, I would probably back it down to that awkward 1.5 times per week. I know that sounds dumb, but this is what that would actually look like. It's a pretty good split. So if frequency is overstated in terms of importance, then what actually is? Volume. Are there people out there that respond really well to high intensity? Yes, your Menser, your Yates, but you're not one of them. You would have known by now. I'd bet money on the fact that they would respond just as well to high volume. I think one of the more fascinating things is when they look at studies with quote-unquote non-responders, the moment they increase their volume past a certain point, they start to respond. So when in doubt, increase your volume. So how much do we actually need? It's gonna be tough because I would say the research on this is even more confusing. Here's a pretty prominent study that looked at trained subjects, which is a good start, and they compared 6, 18, or 30 sets for biceps and triceps, or 9, 27, and 45 for quadriceps, and it was split up over 3 sessions. Motherfucker. Of the muscles tested, the more you increase the volume, the greater the growth. But when you look at the exercises, I wouldn't consider any of these a good bicep or tricep exercise unless you really screwed them up. So maybe we don't need that much volume. But when you look at the quads, I would say all of those are directly correlated to rec fem and vastus lateralis growth, so maybe we do? When you look at the relationship between set volume and hypertrophy, it follows a diminishing returns curve. Meaning that the results you get from hitting a body part 1 time a week to hitting it 3 times a week are extremely different, but as you go up, it starts to level off. So I would say a good general recommendation is start out with 10 sets per muscle per week, and if you're not seeing results, incrementally increase it from there. And be smart about it. We all have muscles that respond better than others, so keep that volume consistent and increase it on the ones that are lagging and making you an embarrassment. Also remember that advanced sets, like rest pause sets, are more closely related to doing 3 sets than they are to 1. So you can easily increase your volume by just switching out one of your traditional sets to a rest pause or drop set. Hooray! Also check this thing out. I would have burned down a small village for this, but I didn't have to. Facebook Marketplace. Another common question is, should you be training to complete failure? And yes, that's a new dog we found because people suck. So if you're in the market, she's pretty great. There's no statistical difference for hypertrophy from failure all the way up to 3 reps in reserve. The problem is most people underpredict the amount of reps they have left in the tank by 2. So more than likely, if you aimed for 3, you probably had 5 and you screwed it up. To me, it just feels like you're half-assing the workout. Yeah, it reduces soreness, but I'd rather manage my recovery in a different way and just take an extra day off and whole-ass the workout. It's the same reason I started taking testosterone when I was younger, because I had to find a way to decrease my sperm count and get those bastards swimming in a circle because I suck at pulling out. That brings up an interesting question that I haven't been able to figure out the answer for. I asked Brad, and he gave me a generic answer on failure. Dan thought I was talking about cluster sets, and there isn't one single research paper centered around this one question. Most of us, when we train, as we get closer to failure, we start pausing in between reps. A good example of this is on leg day. When you go down and squat, come back up, you take a breath in between. You squat and you try to get another one, you take 2 breaths, sometimes even 3. Wouldn't it be better to not take those pauses and keep a consistent tempo on those transition phases of a rep and just fail faster? I don't know. With the amount of time you save, you can probably add another set to whatever body part you're hitting, and that would probably be more beneficial. Again though, I have no clue. Use your little chubby fingers and comment below if you pause as you get closer to failure too. Speaking of tempo, I started testing a 3-second eccentric and 1-second concentric based upon this meta-analysis I found. Seemed legit, had a lot of studies backing the recommendations given, but turns out it's another good reason not to trust people. The study used to justify a 3-second eccentric was done on untrained women. The rationale for a 1-second explosive concentric, 69 to 76-year-old men. There was an interesting study that was hidden within there, though, that looked at men training with 50% of their 1-rep max with a slower tempo, 3-second eccentric, 3-second concentric, versus men training with 80% of their 1-rep max with a quicker tempo, 1-and-1, identical hypertrophy. Again, take it with a grain of salt because it was men who didn't have experience with regular exercise training, untrained. But it does give hope to those of us that are a little bit older and constantly hurting ourselves that maybe we can just back the weight a little bit and adjust the tempo and get similar results. That would be nice. I'm still figuring out the perfect volume to frequency ratio of the upper-lower split. I have it set up now where you hit everything 2 times a week, but every 3rd week, you hit it 3 times. So far, it's been pretty damn good. There's nothing crazier than a full upper body pump. You can barely move. I'll leave a link in the description so you can get notified when that drops. Here's a recap of everything we talked about, as well as the cited sources, just in case you have trust issues too. Another solid Facebook Marketplace purchase. Also, another crazy idea I had is since it's winter and no one's gonna see you with your shirt off except for your poor wife, what if we did like an 8-week bulk and we just turned into big fat meatballs and got as big as possible? You guys decide. It's either that or the upper-lower split. I'm gonna go throw up now.